to you guys today really quickly about my thesis. My thesis is titled Habitat 44, The Art of Reconstruction. And the reason I'm doing this is because it was my personal journey into exposing myself to the field of holography. Now, holography today is somewhat misunderstood, and a lot of different things are called holography that really isn't. And I had the fortunate opportunity to meet a professor who teaches this at the University of Toronto and OCAD University, and is the reason why I actually decided to pursue a master's degree at OCAD to pursue that field. The funny thing is, though, is that there actually is no program for holography in Canada altogether, and I actually want to change that. But first, I thought the best way to do that is to engage with communities to show them my experience of actually teaching it to myself. So my goal is to encourage others to learn more about it and to use it as a medium. So my work can be summarized as environmental holography. Is that working? Oh, sweet. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, cool. All right. Environmental holography can be defined as public holographic art that's permanently integrated with architecture or the environment. To define holography, I'll take the negative approach of what holography isn't, the Rosalind Krauss style of not sculpture, not architecture approach. And I'm going to show you a few images here of what some may accidentally classify as holography. Some of you are familiar with this image. It's probably super pixelated behind me right now, but I wanted to find something that was as close as possible. This is not holography. Oh. You may have also seen this pyramid-like construction before, used for a lot of demonstrations or product demonstrations, and you can kind of move around this pyramid glass that you actually can still see. This is not holography, and I apologize for that. It's not holography either. And lastly, advertisers are using this quite often to display product information in a capsule. This is not holography either. What these all are, though, are beautiful examples of present-day Pepper's ghost techniques. It's an illusion technique that's been used in theater for a few hundred years and is popularized today by the art of projection mapping. A very good, on a side note, very good quick demonstration of this technique, because I've actually searched for the best way and the easiest way for people to actually understand what Pepper's ghost is actually a Netflix series, Sherlock. I love that show. You should check it out, and there's an actual episode titled The Abominable Bride that actually shows it in 2 minutes exactly how Pepper's ghost works. I'm expecting a lot of you to do art installations with Pepper's ghost after you see it, because it is quite easy. So I refer to holography instead as a material recording of light. Now, I do not have a science or engineering background, and holography is somewhat considered fringe science. It isn't really, and it's really just about working with laser technology as a tool. I'm going to show you two holographic art pieces today that I've made. The first one is my first hologram, Holomentus. It is sometimes referred to as a hollow sculpture, and I made it for the 2016 exhibition titled The Brain Project, which was sponsored by Bakerest. That's it at the top right-hand corner. Mine's the boring-looking one that looks completely translucent with no colors on it. It consists of a vacuum-formed acrylic sculpture of the left and right hemispheres of the human brain. So what I did is I actually took data from a professor's brain recording and modeled it in a 3D program, Blender, and imported all of the brainwave data to actually show it all the brainwaves moving on his brain. As an actual video or animated video, when you move around this hologram left to right, you see the entire animations happen before your eyes. Now, I modeled this viewing experience digitally in a 3D program because I wanted to replicate what that movement would be like when an audience actually comes and approaches an art installation in a gallery space. Basically, I have to replicate and create a virtual camera in a 3D program to replicate that. And I did all of this in order to make this hologram that you see here, which is actually considered to be a digital hologram. Now, a digital hologram is really what refers to an image that was created virtually or digitally. Now, this piqued my interest as a research initiative and spiked my desire to understand holography further. And I really enjoyed this process because it gave me the opportunity to contextualize holography with something else. And I thought that was the best way for people to even understand what it's like. For those who actually were participating in that process, who were engaged with the idea of what holography was, that whole definition of what holography is to them has totally changed. Based on those images I showed you earlier, which they would call holograms, they don't call that anymore as they saw the experience of me recording and embedding light into actual film material or glass. I think here, these are just different views of it, and this is a close-up view of the brain hologram. And I have this as a permanent installation at OCAD now. When I did this brain project exhibit, the Baycrest did a whole presentation of all the sculptures and paintings of the brain sculptures that were done, and they used it to advertise a Yorkdale retail wing. And I strongly refused. They were slightly disappointed with me, but what I was trying to tell them is that I actually used neural imaging research to actually do this, and actually wanted to engage students and other people to really understand how holography worked. So my actual sculpture was not auctioned off. It exists at OCAD's property. I like to move it around in different exhibition spaces to get people exposed to what it's like. So I apologize for the photography here because taking photographs of holograms are actually really difficult, and it's a challenge. And it's a never-ending one, which I love. So it's always something challenging for me to actually do. So in order to get a very good close-up view of it, feel free to come to the OCAD property at any moment in time to ask about it. Now, the whole process for Habitat 44, which is my thesis, involved going backwards, actually. The hologram that you saw before is a digital hologram. It took expertise that I was already familiar with as a digital designer, using digital software to actually make the subject in question. But I actually wanted to know how people did it in the 60s and 70s, because yes, this field is that old. But I believe it's actually resurfacing now, because before, lasers were very inaccessible, and now they are a lot more and a lot cheaper to get. As a matter of fact, you can get a laser for $1 in a dollar store today. Now, making holograms is exciting for me, especially in the analog way, as it inspires my photography practice and vice versa. As you can see by these photos, like this one here, I think is glass cubes. And these glass cubes were going to be part of my actual exhibition subject, where I was going to overlay these cubes into a different subject matter. And this is a photo of the cubes themselves, and the reason why I'm stipulating that, you'll see shortly, is because you sometimes cannot tell, which is kind of the point of holography. So these are actually a photograph of the cubes in the actual lab space that I'm actually illuminating right now for exposure. And here's another photo of the architectural model of a pavilion that I designed, being set up for lighting. I don't think it's very viewable with this lighting here right now, but there's a acrylic sculpture, an acrylic architectural model that's laid across kind of like in a diagonal here, and some model trees and things like that around it. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually illuminating the object. Now, similar to photography, you are looking at a subject or a scene, and the idea is that you're trying to get enough light in a certain way so you can get that beautiful image that you want to capture. It's very similar in holography, but what I'm doing now is I'm using coherent light, which is laser light. It's not white light, meaning white light is actually all colors. Coherent light, you actually have to use one pure color, 100% pure light of one color. So in this case, I'm actually using a green laser that we have at our laboratory to illuminate the object. And here is an example of what you get after you develop your film, because that's how you record holograms as well. It's very similar to film photography. And here I'm back in the space again, the lab space, and on a platform that you cannot see are those glass cubes. And I also have in my hand a glass plate, a holographic plate of the hologram that I actually just tested. And as you can see, it's very difficult to see where the physical platform ends and where my actual hologram begins and where the platform continues. So this is an idea of how holography can give this realistic sense of physical images existing in the space. And this is the part of it that actually excites me. So this is what you get, and I want to show another example, which again, I don't think is very bright here. I don't know if you can increase the brightness at all, but Basically, what's happening here is that there are some glass cubes on the platform again, but the ones that you see in the dead center here, those are all holograms. So they're not really floating in that room. I have light turned on very dimly in the background, but basically when you're looking at this, it looks as though those glass cubes are suspended in air right now, and you cannot really see the glass plate that's really showing it to you. So this is the part of holography that really fascinated me, and I was successful at actually making my first hologram in that analog way. So working with lasers is really, to me, the most fun part, but it's also the most dangerous part because that kind of lighting can really affect your retina. And basically, you have to go through basic training on understanding how light really reflects off of reflective surfaces like metals and things like that. Things that we're all kind of very familiar with, but you want to go through some rigorous training when you're doing it because you know how to avoid looking at certain things when you actually have a high-powered laser turned on in a room. Now, for my exhibit, I think I only have a minute. For my exhibit, basically, I had made 2 holograms, one of the glass cubes that I explained earlier and the pavilion. And here is an image that I can't really see from here, but is side by side. It looks like it's side by side, but what's happening is that I have 2 glass plates suspended from a 14-foot ceiling, and I actually have as well, there's another view of it. In that space as well was the architectural maquette suspended at that same level. And when people entered into this space, they were unable to notice really the glass plates themselves. They only saw the bright image that were being lit by the lasers. And it looks like as though depending on the angle at which you came at, it looked as though the glass cubes were actually part of the actual landscape around the pavilion. Or when someone came from the far right over here, they would see the pavilion as a hologram, and then they get confused at one point because they're like, wait a second, how did it move over there? So the whole idea of this is that, for me, holography is really this idea of making physical images. They're 3D and they're virtual, but they're physical in nature because they're fully measurable. You cannot actually, or you're not supposed to, really scale images when you record them as a hologram, because they're actually direct representations of the physical measurement of what you were recording. And the way that you normally do a traditional hologram is that you put it on a table in front of the actual photographic film that you're going to expose it with, and you're not really changing its size. So when the hologram is made, typically when you're looking at one, it's of an actual measurable thing that you can literally take a ruler to and measure it, and that thing that was recorded, that was the measurement of the actual object itself. And I thought this was really interesting about the actual field. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to get right to the end. I think that's it. Whoops. Really fast. Okay. So I just want to end off with this quote because this kind of tells people what I'm actually doing with it. Now, Pierluigi Capucci is one of the actual few theorists that are actually working in holography and trying to promote the actual field and learning of it. And I think his quote resonates with me because I've actually used holography as a learning point to understand and make better 3D work in the digital realm. Doing my program in digital futures, this was almost like a big no-no because you said, you know, I went to get a digital degree and I went back and did analog things instead. But I'm using it as an insightful method to understand 3D better. My actual vision is that I believe that mixed reality has different views today of what it can actually be, and I think there's a really interesting future of mixed reality being combined with holography to make it more of an interesting thing and something that's more tangible in everyday practice in an industry. And I think I'll end off there. Thank you.